Hey everybody, welcome to my Cryo Cannon Impact Axe tutorial. And don't worry, there will be no bunkies in this video. Well, except for that one. There we go. Moving on. So for my first driller build tutorial, I really wanted to focus on two items, and those are the Cryo Cannon and the Impact Axe. I wanted to focus on these two together because when used in conjunction, it can be a really powerful combination. So let's start with the gear modifications for the Cryo Cannon. I'm not going to go through every single one, as I think there are plenty of resources out there that discuss the pros and cons of each. Instead, I'm going to go through my build and why it works so well for me. So in Tier 1, I use the faster turbine spin-up. Much like the minigun, the delay kinda sucks when you're taken off guard, so this just gets the weapon going as quickly as possible. In Tier 2, I use the bypassed integrity check. This is probably where a lot of people will disagree with me. The overclocked engine turbine does increase the range of the Cryo Cannon by 50%, and while that is probably very valuable to a lot of people, I've never had much issue with the range. I tend to fight in close and use the Impact Axe to soften up ranged enemies as I close distance. For me, I empty the tank quite a bit on larger enemies, so choosing bypass integrity check saves me the 1 second delay penalty for emptying the tanks, which I prefer. Tier 3 is kinda lame. It was a toss-up between improved pump and increased flow volume. The former may be better, but I've been using the latter forever, and I'm stubborn and cranky, and I don't want to change. Tier 4 is an easy one in my opinion. Larger reserve tank adds 150 to your tank, and the Cryo Cannon burns through ammo if you're not careful, so this one is key for my uses. In Tier 5, I use Cold Radiance. I'm sure Fragile is a more popular choice as I think people want the Cryo Cannon to kill more with direct damage, but Cold Radiance really helps when you're being overwhelmed, and it makes swarmers a non-issue. Thanks to Update 32, frozen swarmers now automatically die, so with Cold Radiance that means whatever direction you're firing, swarmers within 5 meters of you will freeze, as well as your average grunts, and this really helps prevent enemies from getting within striking distance. And lastly, the Overclock. While Ice Spear and Snowball are fun, they are unwieldy and waste a lot of ammo, and Ice Storm again tries to trick you into wanting to do more direct damage. The obvious choice for me is perfectly tuned Cooler. You simply freeze enemies faster. This is again important when facing larger enemies like oppressors and bulk detonators. And then there's the Impact Axe, possibly my favorite weapon in the game. It deals a whopping 240 damage, which is one of the highest single-shot attacks in the game. It takes some practice, but once you can fling these bad boys across the cave in the middle of a swarm and actually hit stuff, you'll never use those other two grenades ever again. So a few things about the Impact Axe. First of all, you get 8 of them, the most of any grenade type in the game. Second, they are reusable in the sense that if you miss your target, you can pull them out of the ground with the use key. Third, when using the Vampire perk, these count as melee attacks, and a kill gets you the plus 5 HP a pickaxe or power attack kill would. Alright, so enough theory, let's see the Cryo Cannon in practice. So I'll admit that I struggled with the Cryo Cannon at first. When we get to the end of missions and I'd be at or near the bottom of the kill count, I couldn't wrap my head around it as it always seemed like I took out more enemies than I actually did. This resulted in me vacillating between the Crisper and the Cryo Cannon, even though I knew deep down that the Crisper was not for me. I'm not sure what eventually clicked, but I realized that the Cryo Cannon is designed more for a support role, so while you may not personally rack up kills using the Cryo Cannon, it helps your team tremendously as enemies take a whopping 3 times more direct damage when frozen. The Cryo Cannon is also absolutely essential if your team does decide to build a battle hull. Yeah, battle hull. This is because the Cryo Cannon is really the first line of defense and the main reason the swarm is unable to overtake the battle hull. This is also why I like to be slightly in front and below of the firing squad when inside the battle hull. You can easily conserve ammo in the battle hull by just burst firing the Cryo Cannon and letting your teammates mop up over top. So let's first go over ideal cryo usage. So obviously containing large amounts of weaker enemies is one of the main uses of the Cryo Cannon. Grunts and swarmers are pretty easily dealt with, especially using Cold Radiance. However, the Cryo Cannon is more than capable of dealing with larger enemies when paired with the Impact Axe, which is why I wanted to discuss them together. If we look at the Impact Axe stats, shown here thanks to the DRG wiki, you'll see the direct damage is split into 2 parts. Part 1 is not affected by frozen status, and neither is AoE, but Part 2 of the direct stats are. This means that triple direct damage boost applies to the 110 melee damage of Part 2. Add all that together and you have 460 total damage. This means you can use these in tandem to take out things like Spitball Infectors, Brood Nexuses, and Oppressors, which even on Has 5 only require 2 freezes and 2 axes to be killed. Alright, now let's look more in depth at individual enemy type effectiveness. Now I've already shown a few of these, but by far my favorite use of this weapon tandem is against flying enemies. Goo bombers are a massive nuisance, and though it takes a lot of ammo, they can be easily frozen given how low and slow they fly. And once you get the arc down, taking out individual Mactera Plague with a single impact axe is a breeze. I honestly don't remember if this is default or not, but I do have grenade mapped to the middle mouse button, which makes timing a lot easier for me. It's just so satisfying knocking something out of the sky with an impact axe, and if you really practice at it, you can really hit some crazy shots from across the cave. The Cryo Cannon also works really well against clouds of Mactera Plague as long as you're strafing and jumping and staying evasive. You can use it to quickly freeze those goddamn grabbers, and so long as you're within range, you can very quickly freeze a nanocyte breeder. And quick side note for your non-driller friends, once it's frozen, it's dead. Any flying enemy that's frozen is dead, so don't waste your ammo. And fun fact, if any row hit the ground before you freeze the breeder, you can destroy them with your impact axes and still pick the impact axe up. This also works for the spores in the fungus bogs. And double fun fact, if you have all 8 axes, throw 4 in the ground before you take your resupply. The resupply then brings you back up to your full 8, but you can still grab those 4 later, so you functionally have 12 axes. Just don't try to pick up any of those 4 until you've used some in your current inventory because you can only carry a maximum of 8. And definitely don't activate windows. Anyway, Menace also freeze really quickly and are really easily dispatched, provided you can get within range, obviously. And you can actually freeze a cave leech. As for enemies that might give you a little more trouble with this build, Kronar don't freeze, and they don't really take a whole lot of cryo damage unless most of their armor is gone, but the impact axe will still do the trick. As for the younglings, they do take a little more cryo damage, and when they spring up to attack, one impact axe takes them out. The worst by far is the Glyphid Dreadnought. I pretty much feel completely useless when I'm facing one of these with my team. Satchels really only damage its armor, so it is helpful to start the fight that way, but beyond that, you really can't do a whole lot. They do the stomp every time they're frozen, and it takes so much ammo to freeze them that it's really not even worth it. If you do manage a freeze during the health phase, an impact axe still does a good amount of damage. Otherwise, you're better off with a crisper with sticky flames and the Subata with hollow point bullets, because once the shields are back up, you really can't do much again. And unfortunately, the twins aren't really any better because they move so fast and get underground before you're able to freeze them anyway. Thankfully, the Hive Guard is another story. The Sentinels are very susceptible to the Cryo Impact combo, and once you have all of them killed, the Hive Guard itself actually freezes pretty quickly, and the glowing crystals or whatever take a lot of damage in that state. So once you have all 3 of those down, you can freeze the vulnerable Hive Guard to deal max damage. The only other thing you can't really do a ton of damage to on your own is a bulk detonator, but you can freeze it, which can be equally important. This brings us to the quick and final portion of this video, which is the ability cancellation that these 2 weapons offer. Freezing a bulk detonator right as you deplete its health cancels out the massive explosion and leaves you with a non-damaging blast that just knocks you backwards. Now, in case you were wondering, this works on the Cressus detonator as well. In fact, too well, so instead of learning the hard way like I did, let me just tell you firsthand, don't freeze the Cressus detonator, because this cancels out the gold as well. Another fun ability cancellation is that an impact axe can cancel out a Praetorian's acid spray. And last but certainly not least, the Cryo Cannon can actually freeze a Huli Hoarder for a split second, which can help your team finish it off before it burrows back into the ground. So that's going to do it for my first build tutorial. If you are still here, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and leave a comment if there's anything specific you'd like to see in the future. Rock and Stone.